You got one life, for crying out loudly. You might as well just give it all you got.
The Deej, Dan Jourdan.
Then you don't got to worry about selling anymore because they're just too busy buying. What's it going to take to get you into this car today, huh?
And now, please welcome the sales energizer, Dan Jourdan.
Gosh, I love that. Every time I see it, I get pumped up. That's the thing. You can do it to yourself. You don't got to get, jazzed up from other people giving it to you. You can do it yourself.
I think I need to create one that's a little more self-deprecating.
Yeah.
We've got to, there's only so much the screen can handle.
That's right.
Here with the size of your head.
You got to soften it up a little. It's not conceit. It's slightly embarrassing, but that's my persona. But it's been that way my entire life. Can I tell you a little secret?
It's your show. You can say anything you want. Well, not anything.
I'm going to tell you all a little secret. When I was in 9th grade, I was in an assembly at high school, and they were running for officers for high school, like the president and vice president, whatever they were running for. And all I saw was 500 people in the audience and one person on stage. And I went home that night and I wrote my speech that I was going to give 2 years later. I wrote it that night and I prepared it for 2 years, and I ran for treasurer. And what happened was the speech was really good, but it was, it wasn't anything they would accept. And so I gave them a different speech that I would give, and I delivered this one, which to rousing applause. It was so exciting. And I got disqualified. So I'm the only person ever in Fair Lawn High School that ran unopposed and lost.
You should have like some sort of certificate for that, or a T-shirt printed, or something to commemorate such an occasion.
Yes, it was a big time. And actually, the teacher, Mrs. Lawrence, got in trouble because she was the political science teacher, and they thought that she initiated. She hated me. She hated me for the rest of my high school.
Someone hated you? Come on.
Well, you know what? That's the type of thing I've come to realize that some people like me and some people hate me, but very few people are indifferent toward me.
You are polarizing, my friend. You are polarizing.
I'm a little polarizing. And along with polarizing, we have an awesome polarizing event coming up right here.
We do.
A wonderful woman. You want to introduce her? Because I think
that was a segue. But before we do the introductions, a little housekeeping where we've got some folks that have already joined. When you do join, please give us a wave. We already have some shout outs. Of course, our good friend Jim Fuse from Fusion Marketing is.
How much do you love Jim Fuse? That guy is
awesome.
He's all in all the time.
That's right. So, Dan, do you want to do the honors and introduce our guest for today and the polarizing topic?
Well, Gerri Vereen she's one of those people. I was given a presentation, I believe, at one of those speeches that I was giving, and she was in the audience. And she's one of those people that when you're speaking, you look around the audience, you see who's getting it, who's not getting it, and who's just flat out disagreeing with you. And those people are generally the smartest ones in the room.
That's right.
And so we got to talking, and we have great conversations all together. And I thought, what would be better than to bring such a strong, vibrant woman who's doing such good work for women all over the nation, getting them on boards of corporations, than to bring her out here on the show so everybody can enjoy her as I did. So please welcome Gerri Vereen. Bring it out for Gerri Vereen. Woohoo! Oh, down there.
The crowd goes wild.
Thank you, Dan.
The crowd is going wild.
Thank you, Dan. Was I one of the ones that agreed with you or wasn't agreeing with you?
No, disagreed.
Disagreed. I was one of the ones disagreeing with you.
The smart ones, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, the
Yeah.
smart ones
Yes.
disagree. Okay,
Well,
I love the
because,
story
you
too
know,
about running for the
because it's
treasurer
true.
too.
Because sometimes if I speak and I'm loud and boisterous, and sometimes people will just accept what I say because, hey, if he's saying it with such passion, it must be real. But you don't take that. You listen, and maybe not.
That sounds like me. Yeah.
So that's awesome. So why don't you tell us all what you do or what you're really proud of, and where we could start fighting.
Okay. And thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's a pleasure to be here with both of you today. I'm the co-chair for the 2020 Women on Boards Initiative. And this is an advocacy group to drive women and drive corporate boards to add women to their corporate boards. Research shows that they're so much more successful with women on their boards. We're right now just over 20%. Our initial campaign was 20% of women on every Russell 3000 corporate board by 2020. We hit that goal last September, and so we have a new goal we are announcing later this year.
Oh, well, so you're never satisfied, are you?
That's a nice problem to have.
You hit your
when you
goal.
achieve your goal, and so it's like, okay, now we're going to move the goal even higher once you achieve. That's nice because you don't hear about that often when you're able to move the goals in the right direction. So
yeah. So let me ask you then, what is the ultimate goal?
Gender balance.
Oh.
Gender
and what
balance.
does that mean?
That means that all the boards are balanced, and we'd love women make up
so that's
over
what you're looking for.
50% of the marketplace. Yes, absolutely. In the workforce, women make up over 50%. Not that they're in the upper management, unfortunately.
So are we having some technical difficulties?
So I've got a couple of things. I know you're referring to research, and I know we've got that sort of queued up to go to. So just let me know when you're ready for that.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know, Dan, you had something that you wanted to add?
Well, I'm just. Are we having technical difficulties because she's coming in? Was that just me?
She's fine.
Okay,
Gerri,
great.
She's still live and kicking.
All right. So ultimately, it's 50-50 on boards. Are there any other places in society that people should be 50-50?
Well, I
would
say that if we're going to look at all across the workplace, if we're going to look at corporate boards, if we're going to look at management in corporations, if we're going to look at small business owners, then you start seeing that if you look at a corporation and an S&P 500, women are less represented the higher up they go. Now, they hold more than half of the management occupations. However, and I think you do have a slide, Chris, that represents the women in S&P 500 companies, that you look at the total number of employees, you have 44.7%. It might be the next slide. There you go. And you see as you go up the ladder that you have 26.5% are women in the executive senior level. Then in board seats, it's 21.2. And if it gets to CEOs, it's 5%.
Wow. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. And, one of the most important things that we have to understand is that as we do the diversity inclusion, and we have to consider equity. And equity is a process by acknowledging that there is an unequal starting place. And so what we're trying to correct and address this imbalance. So it is an imbalance. Why do you think it is? Because I'm sure you have a strong opinion on it.
No, like I said, I think there's many reasons. One of them is that people are, like to do business with people like themselves. So it's uncomfortable for some men with women. But another reason, and tell me if you disagree, is that more women do. Well, I'll just ask you: do an equal amount of men or an equal amount of women want that position?
And that's a strong argument for what you're saying, and I would say here's what's the problem. I would say that really what we want to do is get organizations to the fact and the understanding that to be balanced, that they have to offer more balance. And that's an important aspect. And I got to say, in this day and time and what we're going through currently with the pandemic, this is what's going to make a change in the workplace, because women needed more of a balance. They do more of the housekeeping. They do more of the child care. I mean, it's just naturally what they're more responsible for. So men have and stay in the workplace. Now, does that mean that there aren't qualified women trying to get into that? There are absolutely qualified women trying to get into these roles. And you made a good point earlier, because who's hiring these? And I've got a perfect story for you.
Oh, good.
I knew you would like this. I was coaching. Yeah, stories are good. I was coaching this Coca-Cola executive. He'd been with the company for 35 years. And he says, Gerri, I just have no idea why we don't have more diversity on our executive leadership team. And I said, really? I'm shocked that you're shocked. And he says, well, why is that? I said, because you're going to sit here and tell me about all the people that you've known all of your time and your best buds with all these top executives, because you've known them since you graduated from college and started with this organization. And I said, have all of you been very purposefully hiring people that are different from you? Did you bring those people up through the ranks with you? And he goes, wow, I guess I didn't think about this. Is this kind of that unconscious bias? And I said, ding, ding, ding.
Not an intentional boys club, but yeah, right.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and as we, I think we mentioned the other day when we were chatting, and I said, it looks like it's all male and pale at the top.
Yeah, Gerri, you had mentioned something about how most of the time the woman in the household is handling childcare, the household, so to speak. Do you feel like that's changing, and but maybe not as quickly enough to allow for this change in an executive level and females at executive levels?
I think it's a great point, and I do believe that the younger generations are starting to do more of a balance of how these chores are handled and how childcare is handled. I do believe that it is changing some. However, if you look at the CEOs, they're older males, and they're used to more traditional roles. And they also exclude women. It's not like they're going to go in and say, well, I bet she could use a balance, but she is so good and she is so smart. I really want her in upper level. It's not that every upper level executive is going to look at a woman and say that. And then there's stories upon stories about where women have to go in and fight for a raise. In fact, I was reading a story the other day, and this woman said she was accidentally given the wrong pay envelope with the bonus, and it was for her peer who was making substantially more money than she was.
Wow.
And when she got hers and looked at hers, she said, what was I supposed to do with this? And so what do women do when they do that? They self-select themselves out and go to some other organization.
Is there a rest? I'd be curious to know the rest of that story as to what the company said in response to that.
I don't believe that she even did anything about it.
Yeah.
And I read another. Go ahead.
Well, so that there's something there. That's absolutely the case. She did nothing about it. Why is the executive that you're talking with, the person that you're coaching, why is it that person's responsibility? I could ask you this, why are there Well, I'll answer the question, but I'll ask, why are there more men in prison than women?
Because they take more risks. Is that where we're going to go with this?
No, because they commit more crimes. They just do that.
Okay.
Why are there more men, playing hockey than women? Because they like to do that. So men, look, have you ever been in a fist fight?
Wow.
No.
No.
Have you?
Here we go.
Yeah, of course. Chris, have you ever been in a fist fight?
I have been in multiple fist fights, and
Yes,
I'm not proud of answering that question, but
yes, I mean, have boys, growing up, see, it's not just the old boys club, it's the young boys clubs, young boys, they grow up, they play, they fight, they climb trees, they do all this stuff, and they have that they have that bond, they build models, they blow things up, they light fires. These are what boys do.
So I think you're making the point that women are way smarter than y'all are. So go ahead.
Women
Better
are
judgment,
much safer and much.
sure.
And you know what? Am I allowed to share a screen? Can I do it? Is it possible? Okay, well, forget it. I was watching a video on Julius Erving for some reason yesterday. It's just cool to watch old clips of Dr. J.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And it was coming, and he was, he's playing on like a playground parking lot, and there were commentators, and they were talking, when Dr. J used to play here on the playground, you see that school over there? And they had pictures of the school. He goes, kids would be on the rooftops, and they showed pictures of kids with their legs dangling over the side of the school. I mean, 30 feet up, and there's all different levels. This is what, and in trees and all that stuff. And that's what, things, these are like common out. There were no girls doing that. It was all boys.
And I'm not sure what the point is here. So I'm sure you're going to help me.
Yes. The point is, boys, in that situation that you spoke of earlier, if someone found a check and it was deeply different and they did the same work that somebody else did, believe me, somebody would know about it. They wouldn't just stop. They'd call attention to it and say, hey, what's going on? It's isn't right. Let's make this right. We're gonna confront the situation.
You're saying that men are going to be more assertive and aggressive
in
about
general.
That kind of
in general.
I would agree. I would agree because I think that women are taught not to be that way.
Yes.
And so I think what we have to do is how do we even the playing field, understanding there is gender differences, absolutely, without a doubt.
Right. So I guess the question is, no, we weren't talking about it's plain to see
the fighting thing.
It's plain to see. I'm not the smartest person in this group, but what you're saying is when you're saying we have to change, you're not saying we have to change. You're saying the males have to change.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there has to be opportunities so that differences are acknowledged and the differences are not used against someone because they are different. They are different.
Yeah. Well,
I read another story about the woman said that she had to go in and she had to do a PowerPoint to present why. So she said, well, she found out from her colleague, he just simply walked in and said, I want a pay increase. And they said, okay. And she had to give a PowerPoint with compelling reasons. If you even look at women who are trying to get venture capital funds, they have shown, research shows in a venture capitalist pitch, when they're pitching to venture capitalists, that they will choose an attractive man over any woman, attractive or otherwise.
So we've got some questions to add to what we're talking about here that I kind of want to get to. And Gerri, I think this is probably so in your lane. It certainly isn't my lane. This is from Jim. How much of the Pareto principle, is that how we say that?
The 80-20 rule. Yeah.
Applies whether men or women, 80-20 rule. I'm not sure exactly what that question is, but how much of the 80-20 rule is applicable here?
80. So 80% of men make more than 20% of women.
No,
I don't know.
but it's 80-20. Like you'll get 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers, and there's all different things. So, for 80% of that's 80% of women who really want something will get it, or something like that. I'm not sure. You know what? It's a tough question to ask because
Yeah.
I don't know what he's saying.
Yeah, Jim, if you're still watching, if you could clarify that question. He's got another comment here. Mentorship programs are not always put in place, which may be another
That's
another good point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, I find that across the board, and I'm saying for men and women, that it is helpful for men and women. Men tend to get more mentorship because it's more of an informal, and who are most of the executives? They tend to be men. And I would have loved a female mentor growing up to have given me that kind of example, because I'm a little bit older, maybe around more Dan's age. And there were not women executives that I knew. I mean, my mom worked outside the home, but it was something more of a side, she did it on a part-time just because she liked to do it and it was fun for her kind of situation. She did have really good friends who worked outside the home, but that was very few and far between as any examples.
Well, yes, so Dan? I guess the question is this, why was that? Why was it back then there were fewer women working in that place? Society was different, but why was it then?
Oh, I can answer that. So, back in the early 70s, you might say, women couldn't open a bank account without even with either her husband or her father opening it for them. So, I'd say that was a big holdup. But think about single women back then who were, had to rely on somebody to help them do this. And we don't.
No, but do we? I mean, I guess here's a question: is 20% enough?
20%. What enough?
Of
20%
the board seats.
Yeah, the board CEO.
No.
No.
Of course not.
No. I think 50% is what we talked about.
Or
something that's equivalent to the population, right?
Well, I guess
right, and definitely
I think
to the population.
There's a greater number of men who want to be. Well, maybe I'm wrong. You correct me. Well, I would like to know what the percentage is of men who are board members compared to the amount of men who want to be board members versus the percentage of female board members of women who want to be board members.
So I would say that are we talking equally, like different, the same kind of roles and that kind of thing,
do women really want this? I mean,
yes, without a doubt. I'm telling you, it is overwhelming to me that once I got involved with this, every executive woman I talked with said, I am so interested in getting on a board. This is what I want to do. And because, and I'll tell you why. It's because a lot of them say, look, I've paid my dues. I've, busted my butt, if you will, all these years, and I want to continue working. I enjoy working. I don't necessarily want to stay in an organization, but if I can feel like I'm contributing, I just had this conversation with someone I'm coaching. I'm trying to get her off of running a board. And because I said, you really need to let this board move forward and grow. And she wants to, but it's transitioning out. And I mean, there's sometimes you have people on boards and they've been there for years and years, and they should self-select themselves out, frankly. And if there's even a slide I have with large companies, women on boards, the share price is higher when you have women on boards.
Well, if that's the case, they should do more of it.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I mean, because the whole idea is for them to earn more money. And if earning more money is
as a sheriff, right?
if earning more money is just as simple as getting more women on boards, everyone would do it.
Absolutely, everyone would do it.
I'm
Well,
serious.
all the
Yeah,
research,
everyone-
well,
I
all the
wouldn't
research shows. All the research shows that share price performance is a plus 20%
20%.
when you have, yes, when you have women on board.
Well,
share price performance is
you know, if
up to 80.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
tough time. That's a tough number to believe, because if share price were 20, if all you had to do was to increase your share price by 20% is to put women on boards, it would be done. It would be 100%.
We've got some
Well-
clarification from Jim on his 80-20 thing here. 20% of
20%
men or women tend to be the driven ones. The other 80% don't have the drive.
Oh, that's true everywhere, despite whatever gender you're talking about.
Exactly. So how many men who have paid their dues and worked their whole thing, that wanted to be on the board, that didn't get on the board? You know what I wanted to do my whole life? Play a shortstop for the New York Yankees. As much as I tried, I still don't get to play shortstop for the New York Yankees. And Derek Jeter, when he was playing, would get $20 million for playing shortstop for the New York Yankees. And I just couldn't do it. Are they being
That would be
unfair
a
to me?
skill level that, well, either you didn't practice enough, you didn't practice enough when you were younger.
Right. Right. So
I think you
couldn't
may
Do
have
you know
fell
how
into a
people get
trap,
on
Jerry.
boards, though? Do you know how people get on board? Do you know how the
it's all
selection process?
good old boys club. Yeah, they just know
It is.
somebody who knows somebody who
It
knows
is.
somebody.
It's
Yeah, and they
absolutely
schmooze, and they schmooze, and they sell themselves, and their parents know somebody, and it does all that stuff.
So
But
this
that's
is, yeah. So
always
this
the case.
leads to my question. And this was the question that I was thinking about earlier, and I want to kind of bring this back on the rail, specifically to women on boards and your efforts there, Gerri. And that is,
Sure.
outside of just awareness, which is certainly what's being done here. I'm learning plenty, and our audience here is learning plenty as well. Outside of the awareness of this, which is extremely interesting, what is Women on Boards doing to make these changes, and what do you see attributes your success in going over your goals of 20% at the end of the last year and resetting your goals that you're going to be announcing upcoming in the summer or fall? I'd love to know what are the efforts that go on from Women on Board to make these changes.
Well, thank you for asking. Initially, the organization started 10 years ago, and they were very instrumental in the law that California passed, where each corporate board has to have at least one woman on the corporate board. They were part of that push and the advocacy for that. They have chosen really not to be part of any more laws because they don't feel that that's really where they want their energy. So what we're doing now is we're recognizing companies who have 20% of women on their corporate boards. We are calling them out. We're giving them press. We're doing tons of social media around this. When we're holding our events, we have over 30 cities in the US, and we're also going globally. And we're running events where these corporations have the opportunities to bring in women and senior executives to talk about how they can bring up women through the ranks to become one of those board members. Because if you have a board, wouldn't you like someone who actually have great insight into what's happened within your company? And
Absolutely.
If they decide at some point in time, look, I'm ready to retire, but I want to just continue serving the company. And if I can drive the revenue, why not, right?
I think that's what we're talking about, right? Is if a company, no matter the gender, is successful and what they're doing is proving to be successful, then that's what you want to start modeling. And if that means
Absolutely.
having more women on these boards, and that's working well for your business, then that's what companies need to be doing for sure.
Really,
Absolutely.
Gerri, that's your sales pitch right there. You want to increase your share price by 20%? We have a solution for you. Much better because that's what they're buying. They're buying that. I mean, if that's true, I'm sold. It's done, because I'm all about merit. Just like, show me the results. Balance for balance sake doesn't make sense to me, but balance for profit, That's what these boards are looking for. And I think you got that. Much better than go the law route. If you go the law route and someone's on the board because they had to put somebody on the board for there's always a little question in someone's mind, even if they are of good quality and all that stuff. There's always a question. I wonder if she's here just because of that law.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand. Right. And, they're pushing back in California. And which is what they expected. They expected some of the companies to push back. But what it's doing is it's just bringing visibility. But if you look at companies with the highest number of women on their executive committee, they perform better. They're 21% more likely to have an above average EBIT.
I think you've got some data here. I believe that.
I got to call out that one thing with Jourdan Favor. Put that thing up with Jourdan Favor.
Yeah. We'll pop that up. But I wanted to do this really quickly if I could, because it's.
By the way, Gerri, is it okay to call women chicks anymore, or is that done?
No.
Can't do that anymore.
If it's meant to empower, I guess. It's as long as it's meant in the right way. I don't know. You're a pale male, so you might want to curtail that.
I told Chris to rein me in if I get too offended.
I have this button. It's a boot Deej out of the stream button, and so.
But Gerri, everything I say is out of love and respect. Please understand that. It really is. It really is. I have, because I see there's flaws in myself. My daughter was here the other day, and she had a bunch of friends here, and there was a boy there, and they were going to go downstairs or whatever. And I immediately said, okay, you guys can go ahead and do whatever it is. And I pointed to the boy and I said, "You're in charge." And, don't gasp like that. It was a teachable moment for me. And Sophie Bell came right up to me and said, basically was you. And why do you always choose somebody else over me? You'll even do but I immediately went to the male. And so, yes, I'm okay.
So you're definitely part of the problem here.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. So here's the slide I was referring to, and I think there's a couple slides here, Gerri. Can we do we want to talk through these for those that are watching?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want the numbers and you say, hey, if it's going to perform better, then I'm all about it, here it is. 27% are more likely to outperform on a longer term value creation. They've even shown smaller business owners, even though they have to fight for the money, they outperform most of the male startups.
And these are companies, like what segment and level of companies are we talking about with this data?
So,
okay.
I was pulling was on the corporate corporations. It was more on the S&P 500 or Fortune 500, which I think is a pretty strong stat.
It's true. I think that's something, by the way, to consider also, because you're talking about company. By the way, Jourdan Favor knows this because he's at school being an accountant type. But that EBIT, that EBIT, that's earnings before interest and taxation. For those of you, using your fancy lingo. So Jourdan, is the most qualified person to be on the board of people based on their gender. Of course, I would say yes, and everybody would say yes. But there's a different world between the small business world, which is, fully 50% of the working population, and the corporate world. And the corporate world has a lot more rules. It's the same rules that all businesses have to follow. But really, small businesses never follow these rules. Small businesses always do just by merit-based, and they rock and roll that way because they're not, no one, people like in your board aren't going, you guys aren't going to attack people, but they won't get attacked if they're small businesses. But as soon as you get to that level, that corporate level, if you're public like that and you're accountable to the marketplace, all these things come into play, and you're really no longer, it's much more bureaucratic. Big business has a lot more in common with government than it does with individuals and the small business owner.
And when you say that, when you say a lot more in common. How would you define that?
With the government, yeah, meaning they're forced to do things that are not financially sensible, that a small business person would never do, or couldn't survive if they did. But given that there's so much money coming in with these companies, that they're able to do those things, hire those lawyers and all that stuff.
Well,
And plus, the smaller companies aren't going to get sued because people know they don't have the money.
well, okay.
But so on those boards, you're not. It's not like you're driving business. There's better managers, just basically managing a workforce. Yeah, that makes sense. Women are better managers, sure, certainly of a family, but not like my wife and my daughter. What they want more than anything is to be a wife and mother. They don't want to be in the workplace.
So what about the women who do want to be in the workplace, who do deliver, who do outperform those guys, and yet? Did you know this? Did you know?
Why would?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm a big proponent. I've put people in. I don't see gender. I've put people in business of all stripes. I'm a big fan of putting people in business, letting them rock and roll. Then you get to call your own shots.
Right. So
I would agree. The problem is that women can't get lent. They don't get the same kind of loans that men get, and that's what we had talked about before. And then that's really the problem.
I have to push back a little, because a lot of men don't get loans. We got to talk about individuals. You know who are the men that get loans? The people that ask 45 times. I asked my wife to go out on a date 26 times before she said yes. It was the 27th time she finally went out with me.
So
and people,
Dan,
it's that aggressive nature.
Go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just saying, as you know, in the Dan Jourdan Sales Energizer enterprise, it's a lot to keep things afloat. So every once in a while during the live stream, we have to tip our hats to our sponsor. So here we go.
Well, if your sales team sucks and you don't know what to do, call Deej 678-910-9912. Call Deej at 678-910-9912.
That was nice. Yeah. So
yeah,
why
it's a nice little
why are you called the Deej anyway? I meant to ask you that before.
That's a good question. I always like when people ask stuff about me, because then I could talk about
Okay.
Another trap.
So
another
when
trap.
I went to high school, I was Danny Jourdan. But there was another kid, Danny Diano, and he was more popular than me. Tall, Italian, good looking, wore those T-shirts, muscles. And so he kept his name Danny, and I got my initials. So it was DJ, which is cool, because DJ is so much better. And then people just call me Deej by nature. But then I found when I had to do really important things, I had to create like an alter ego. And so the Deej came about, and that's who you call upon when you're really in the zone. And the Deej can do things that Danny Jourdan could never do. And so that's where.
Got it. So the Deej, would you agree then it's a good thing to support and advocate for women in corporate boards, in small business owners, and in the executive committees?
I would support all people to do all those things that they want to do, and I would encourage them to do whatever you want and go all out for it. And get shot down 1,000 times, and all that people remember is the one time that you made it. And so, yes, women, men, Martians, children, anybody.
I do not advocate Martians.
What?
Sorry.
My son.
I am an anti-Martian, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
We've had this conversation before, but I think you're wonderful. I think you could literally do anything. I really can. And giving you, an extra advantage just because of your gender, to me, just makes no sense. But I would support and encourage and introduce anybody to anything to move up in their anything they want to do. But they got to make the first step. They got to look, in my opinion, look less about what your barriers are and look and have a greater desire for what you want to get.
So
And if you do that, it's a lot closer.
So what I'm going to say is all the research that I'm showing you, however, is that these women are doing this, that they are going the extra step. And here are the barriers they're running into. And when they get money, to be lended for small businesses, it's about 23 cents to the dollar of what typically men get on loans. And we've already gone through. I mean, these are barriers. These are gender bias. And I'm not saying that men are doing it on purpose. It's the way of the world. So when it's that way and it's not equitable, then how do we help make the playing field level, right?
By encouraging women, the people that you're talking about, not women as a group, encouraging the individual to work harder.
And I would agree. So the women I know, they're all going through training. They're doing everything they can to understand how to become a strong board candidate. Yeah. And I know a woman who's spending a lot of money to go through this process. And
she'll get it.
This is not typical. Well, and I hope so, because we're all pulling for her. However, you know what she's going to have to use is a man networking for her with her CV. That's what's going to make the difference.
But that's how everybody does it. We just use whatever we can. You take whatever. My business is, there was an advertising saleswoman for a Savvy Shopper. I'll never forget it. She would come in and she was a pretty woman, and everybody would come in and would do it. And she sold more than anybody else. Used what she had to make things work and make her business better. Men do the same thing. There are people that we said earlier, there are people that hate me. There are people that hate me for a myriad of reasons, not just because I'm a man. They don't like the way I look, I smell, whatever. Who cares what it is? And so you move past that. There's 7 billion people in the world. How many boards are there? There's thousands of boards. One says no, go ahead. Rock and roll.
So, but the thing is they're not saying no. It's who you know. And this goes back to the whole pale male thing, because the guy at Coca-Cola says, I'm so shocked there's not more diversity in our executive board or our committee. And I said, here's the deal. You've all been buddies for years. You've all been supporting each other for years. And somebody tries to break into that. You have no idea what it's like to be the only woman in the room when it's a business meeting, and they don't want to. You know what I used to do? Here's the story I used to do. Every time I would walk into a meeting, some guy would jump up to the whiteboard with his marker. So you know what I started doing every time I walked in that meeting?
What?
Ran to the whiteboard and grabbed the marker. And I'm like, okay, I got this. I'm running this meeting. Because I finally figured out that's how they ran the meetings. And then when they say, and they say, oh, but women have to just push past it. But do you think there were a lot of men who didn't care for that attitude either? Trust me.
Well, tell them to go suck eggs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's the whole thing.
Because who's making the decision on how I go up through the company? Do you know the guys would tell me? You know what, Gerri? You are a highest performer, but you leave bodies in the way. Really? Why don't you go talk to this guy over here that nobody likes, and yet he keeps getting promoted? And yet they're telling me I need to dial it down. Don't be so pushy. Don't be so aggressive. This is what happens to women when they try and show up like guys. And how many times I've been in a meeting and they go, who's going to take meeting notes? And I'm always like this. Nope, not me. Not
so
we've
got another guest that I think will have some great perspective on this because he's had some experience that he can speak to, and we've had him as a guest before. This is Jason Smith. Welcome, Jason. Founder of Sales Synergistics and Aslan Training and Development. Look at that jacket. You are a sharp dressed man,
He's
my friend.
Always the best dressed in the room.
Oh, this whole thing?
All right, hey,
Jason, meet Gerri. Gerri, meet Jason.
Hi,
Hello,
Jason.
Gerri. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Jason, you had mentioned something about having some. Yeah.
All right, let me
Go
jump in.
Your show.
When I was a kid growing up, I used to I have a family that I went to. It was an African American family with a friend of mine, and his mom used to always tell him. He used to tell him, he would say, he said, Brian. Well, it wasn't a Jewish accent, so he would say, Brian, listen. The way you are, you have to work twice as hard as a white guy to get there, to get to where you're going. Did your mom say that to you?
Every day.
See, that was it. He's a rock star.
And do more to get just the same amount.
That's
or
right.
to get slightly less. And that was always the pressure that was on me. And that's stifling. It really is difficult to manage and work well under those circumstances. Right?
That's it.
What was the purpose of asking the question, though? What was it? You said exactly.
Because I'm saying it's the same. I think it's the same for women. When I was growing up, hell, there were no Jews in middle management. Nobody moved up the corporate ladder. That's why everybody started their own business. Everybody had the little jeweler, had the florist, had the construction place. You did whatever. You had to work around. So tell us your story.
Real quick, let me get to this. About my background. Besides having been born Black and having experienced some isms in my life, I also, while I was at the academy, I majored in social science, social psychology, cultural anthropology. That was where I wound up landing on my major. So I really love this kind of stuff, and I spent a lot of time pondering and thinking about it. And I think one of the things we run into as a culture today here in 2020 is that people are shocked to believe that there are still these isms that are out there. They think that when someone says to me, is there still racism in America? And I say, yes, they're like shocked.
Great point.
Because they're like, I'm not racist.
Right.
It all must be gone. There can't be any sexism out there because I don't do anything to discriminate against women. It must be gone. I don't know anybody who talks about discriminating against women. And I think the perspective is flawed because for all the isms, racism, sexism, whatever, you've got to externalize it, right? You can't make it this personal thing. You have to fight against the cold when the winter comes because winter's a real thing. When winter's coming, you got to fight against it. Well, all these isms we have to deal with, sexism, racism, they're all real and they're all genuine, and we have to fight against them for one very important reason. And you got daughters, right, H?
Say that again?
You've got daughters, right? Did you mention that? Sophie Barry?
You have a daughter.
A daughter, right?
Yeah. Sophie Bell. She's awesome.
This is the why. The why fighting this is important. And I'm going to talk a little bit too long because you got to think about the why that most people talk about is that's just not fair. And so for either any kind of marginalized people, the that's not fair argument really kind of gets bandied about like, quit your whining, go ahead and just deal with it, suck it up, just work harder. Just all you got to do, quit crying. So it's not fair doesn't really fly. The thing you got to point to, and our history will show this, is that this kind of marginalization and the history of this country and everywhere is that when you dehumanize in any way, it leads to systemic abuse. Not just little abuses of not fairness, but like violent, dangerous abuse. And I can prove it to this point. Right now, I want you to think of every derogatory, nasty word that you can think of to physically describe a woman. Every nasty, derogatory word outside of woman or queen or goddess that you can call a woman. Just think of them. Now think of every single word you can think of derogatory, nasty to call a man.
I knew that was coming, but yeah, it's a great point.
So, but that leads to that ability to make that group of people something other than human, just in word alone, leads to you being able to do horrible physical, damaging things to them that become part of the cultural psychology over time. And it takes a long period of time to work those out, right? You have to grow up in a world where you see people, as a child, you see people on the same level. So again, it was a big push in the media for a long time that you had to see Black people in the media and portrayed in a certain way. It's part of the homosexual agenda right now to make sure that all of these different sexual orientations are normalized, because any kind of discrimination or any kind of desire to make them other than human, any of those nasty words that just flew into your head, makes you able to destroy them. And I know this because we would do it in the military when I was in there, and we trained each other to call the enemy something other than that so that you could kill them. Got real heavy. I know I took it there, but that doesn't make sense to corporate America. You have to actually make it go back to dollars. So, Gerri, if you're going to be successful, something that was said earlier, as important as that is for women in the future to not be violently abused in the future, and we have to engineer that in over time by normalizing like you're doing, it's not going to make sense to corporate America unless you can make it about the money. I don't like diversity for diversity's sake, because it makes you some victim that needs help. We have to empower and talk about, here's the monetary benefit, and here's what you're losing if you do not lead the charge on bringing women up. Because I have to do that with veterans, right? Trying to get veterans into better positions in corporate America. It can't be, let's help the poor vets. That doesn't do it. You have to actually show the value of what they can do. So there's the two sides of the coin. We have this important altruistic mission, but that altruistic mission just won't carry all the water. You have to find a way to prove that the goals that you're shooting towards will mean more money for corporate America, because corporate America is amoral, not evil, just it doesn't care anything about those altruistic things. You have to get to the money. So,
you see, Chris, and you didn't want to bring him on. You see?
That's not true. I knew. Yeah, go ahead, Gerri. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, you're making great points, and that's why every slide that I created, it talks about the value to the company, to the shareholders, to our population in general. I mean, if you'll go down a little bit, Chris, I talk about where the female, maybe it's a little bit further up, it's where female founders outperformed their male peers. Investments with at least one female founder performed 63% better than investments with all male teams. 63%. If you're going to put your money somewhere, wouldn't you say, you know what, I really want to see that you got a female on your board. There's got to be a female part of this, right? I mean, and
if you're a business owner, no matter what gender, if you're a business owner, you see that. I mean, to Jason's point, that's got to talk to you.
Yeah,
for sure. Let me come back to one other point to everybody who's fighting against this. When you hear words like this, and I, even as a Black person, I wasn't a fan of this. I didn't like the fact that affirmative action was such a necessary evil, because it gave people something to point at and talk about and complain about. That's unfair. And then the unfair thing comes up. Why give an unfair advantage just because you happen to have a different color of skin, or just because you happen to be a chick, right? There's one of the derogatory terms, right? That I don't like giving those isms, no people, no they, but I don't like to give those isms that kind of ammunition. But it's needed, right? Because the only way to change them over time is for people to grow up and see that stuff. So it does have to be forced. But the other side of it is you have to now, once you get it in place, get those proof points and let the value really shine. Let that lead the way.
Yeah, right? You mentioned the affirmative action. I think another analogy would be one, a massive business here globally, but based in America, is the National Football League. And when they instituted the Rooney Rule to make sure that NFL teams had to interview and consider a specific percentage of African-American coaches for head coaching positions. And it took Art Rooney and the Rooney family in Pittsburgh to get that rolling and instituted. And to your point, Jason, was like, it's really a bummer that they had to do that in order to break down those barriers. And to Gerri's point, what women are facing even now with barriers, right? It's like, yes, there are more women that want to be at these higher levels, but there are barriers. There are, old buildings that are in the way and they can't drive around them. It takes things like what Women on Board are doing and what these other things are doing in order to break these barriers down and move business forward.
Absolutely. And I just want to make a point that when we talk about women, we're talking about all women.
Yeah.
And it's even worse for women of color. And so we're really seriously pushing to have that and advocate for that as well.
Yeah, you had a slide specifically for that I wanted to pull up that I sort of
there was one
right
about
here.
the gender gap. Oh my gosh, yes. And the wage gap. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And you got to think about what women are still dealing with, right? Because as much as Black people and just every other marginalized group by race or creed or any of that, Jews, all of the above, right, Deej? As much as they were held back, don't forget that, Black men got the right to vote in 1870. Women didn't get to vote until 1920. And that's
it's 100
the
years
same
this year.
white men's mothers and sisters and aunts of the same white men that gave the Black men the right to vote first. So there is a systemic ism that's in place that no one can just work themselves out of. And the important thing is it's not something that's coming from any one person. You didn't do this to these women. Don't take it personal. It is just like the weather. It's just there. When it gets cold, you don't cuss out the weather. You put on a coat.
Well, and I think there's a lot of folks that pale males or maybe that are in the positions they're at, and they're fearful when this type of thing happens. And I would say, well, just be better at what you do, and you shouldn't have a problem, right?
But this has been a lot.
When are you going to talk, Dan? Isn't this your show?
It's quite all right. No, I think this was great. I'm glad. Jason, by the way, are you Black?
A little bit.
Yeah,
I've been told
I'm glad he didn't ask me if I
on the Black side.
And here's the thing, and this is true. If someone were to ask me to describe you, as people have, because I said I got this friend Jason Smith, not once ever does that come out of my mouth. That's not even I wouldn't even think of that. That's way down the list. It's so in my life, it's so nothing. And by the way, that's intentional. And it's the same thing for a woman.
Think of how frustrating and maddening it is when you're trying to describe someone. Hey, the Deej, he wears glasses, and he sometimes wears that blue shirt, white hair, and he occasionally, is on this podcast.
I don't describe looks.
I like to put that out there real quick. The short Black guy named Jason? Like, that's what I like to say, right? Is he fat? No, not the fat one, the skinny one. Like, let's get that out of the way, because there's nothing racist or derogatory about describing the way people are.
Yeah, but but it's not even, it's just not looks for me. It's, or if I describe Gerri, unbelievably smart and patient and can hang with me. That's
so I would have to change my pronouns though, so you wouldn't know for sure that I was a female. So maybe I'll just go to they and them. Theirs.
I gotta say that.
And with you, I go, this guy is an up and coming speaker. He's as good as they get. He commands an audience, and he's someone who needs to be on your show. That's how I explain him to Chris.
That's important. It's important that in those lights, in those situations, that's what we're supposed to do. But again, in terms of like not seeing race or gender, to put an uncomfortable analogy out there, how in some of these very strict religious cultures, women have to be completely covered. You can't see an inch of it. They're trying not to see gender. They're trying not to see those beautiful curves and any of those attractive things. And it's not because there's something bad about gender. There's not something bad about race. You can see it, but can you control yourself about it, right? Can we acknowledge that?
Well, so that's the thing. Right? That's the thing.
You know.
We're an hour here, so we gotta close down. But
Go.
no, it's fine. But it's very hard to change somebody else, but it's very easy to change yourself. You just have.
You can only control your reactions. You're not changing. You're controlling your reactions to other people's actions, right?
Well, so don't worry about self-esteem as much as you worry about self-control. And do whatever you want in your house, but when you're out there in the public, you do self-control and you do all that stuff. And you guys have been awesome today, Chris. I mean, could this have been any better?
Great show. Thank you guys so much.
It was fun. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. Gerri, you guys are doing great work. We've got all the information here on the tickers throughout. So you've got the website, socials. So anybody interested in supporting what's going on with Women on Boards, you've got all the information there on the streams. We're going to, of course, all of these streams are going to live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So certainly if you need to refer to any of it, it's there for you to refer to. Thank you so much, Jason,
Absolutely.
Gerri. Dan,
Thank you.
next time, if you could talk, that would be awesome. It's kind of your show. So,
you're fine.
Try to get a word in edgewise.
All right. You changed my mind, Gerri. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Chris. And thank you for your great points, Jason. It was awesome.
Thanks, Gerri.
Awesome.
Credit that bastard.
We almost made it. We almost made it to the end. Almost made it to the end without that. Thanks, guys.